Well, good evening to everybody.
Good evening.
It is so good to see everybody. This is our fourth CJA, our fourth session, which means it is T-shirt time in the city. Hope everybody grabbed their T-shirt beforehand. We want to make sure that everybody receives that gift. Just a reminder, we got refreshments in the back corner. And I really appreciate everybody joining us today for our very important conversation. One of the most important topics I think that we can talk about, one of the most timely topics that we can talk about at the Community Justice Academy is our Crime Gun Intelligence Center. And so we're going to kind of hit all areas of the Crime Gun Intelligence Center here today. You're going to hear from folks from the crime lab who do a lot of the front end work. You're going to hear from Chief Bailey, who's going to talk about the role that IMPD plays in that. And then I'm going to share a little bit of insight into what the prosecutor's office does with all of this information. One of the cool things about the Crime Gun Intelligence Center is this is something that's very much unique to Marion County and the city of Indianapolis. Just to kind of take you back a couple of years, one of the things that we were struggling with in our community was our solve rate on non-fatal shootings. It wasn't necessarily where we wanted it to be, and oftentimes the only evidence that we had at a scene was the casings from a fired gun. And Doug Boxler is going to tell you a little bit more about that. But really trying to figure out creative ways to how we can address this issue, address this problem. I have to give a lot of credit to Chief Bailey and IMPD. They created the Crime Gun Intelligence Center to maximize the intelligence that we were able to gather and put us in a position to file cases and help interrupt these shootings that were taking place in our community. And so it's been an incredibly successful program, but it's a collaborative effort between many agencies. And so I'm excited to share quite a bit of information about that. This is our 12th annual Community Justice Academy, and we could not do this without the help and support of not only the community, but folks in the prosecutor's office. And so I did want to thank Michael Leffler, who's kind of been in charge of putting everything together. Good work, Michael. We appreciate it. A lot of enthusiasm for Michael here today. I love it. I also want to thank Jack Wright, who's been helping us out. Marissa, where are you? Marissa's here. Jake, put your hand up, Jake. Thank you. And then Amani and Carla. Outstanding. And then if I could have our two interns come forward here. Come on up here with me. Don't be shy. So for those of you who don't know, I attended St. Joseph's College in Rensselaer, Indiana, and played basketball up there. Went to Cardinal Ritter High School on the west side, then went up to St. Joe's, and then unfortunately St. Joe's and Rensselaer closed. But the one good thing about it closing is I can tell everybody I'm the all-time leading scorer, and you guys can't prove me wrong. But St. Joe's was reincarnated at Marion University on the west side. We have two interns with us who are from Marion University at St. Joseph's College, who are doing an outstanding job for us. Can you give it up for our interns? Do you mind introducing yourself? Tell everybody where you're from, what your name is, and where you're from.
I'm Jakira Easley, and I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana.
Okay.
Bless you.
I'm Journey Garner, and I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana.
Very cool. And they've been awesome working for us here. We feel very fortunate to have them along. They've been helping us out with CJA as well. And so we're very excited to have them join our team. So just wanted to make sure everybody knew who all the folks were who were helping us put this presentation together. I want to give a shout out to everybody on Channel 16 and YouTube. Thank you for watching. This was a hybrid year. We've got some people who are in person, some people who are watching online. I know there's some people who still had some concerns about being in person, which we totally appreciate. For those of you who are watching online, Michael has assured me he will get you a T-shirt, even if that means he will deliver it personally himself. So everybody who's participated and viewed the 4 sessions, you will get your T-shirt. Just wanted to make that clear to everybody. And so with that, I want to begin today's presentation. We have tremendous panelists here today. The first person who's going to be talking to you today is Douglas Boxler, who's a firearms section supervisor at the Indianapolis-Marion County Forensic Service Agency, also known as the Crime Lab. He's been a forensic scientist within the firearms sections for 13 years, conducting comparisons of fired evidence to determine if the evidence has been fired by a particular firearm. Along with his supervisor duties, other duties currently performed are serial number restorations, NIBIN entry, and he'll tell you a little bit about what NIBIN means. And he testifies many times in court. I can tell you when I was a rank and file deputy prosecutor, whenever I saw his name on a firearms report, it always brought me great relief because I knew he was going to do an excellent job of testifying. So give it up for my good friend, Mr. Boxler. Our next presenter is the incomparable Chris Bailey, who has served as the Assistant Chief of Police for IMPD since December of 2019. He joined the IMPD in 1999. 1999? Wow. Is that right? I graduated high school in 1999. He's currently in his 24th year of service in the city of Indianapolis. Chief Bailey graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree in Public Safety Management from Indiana University. He graduated from the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy in 1998 and the Indianapolis Police Department Academy in 1999, with his first assignment as a patrol officer on the IMPD South District. He was promoted to the rank of sergeant in 2005 and has since been promoted to every merit and appointed rank on IMPD, gaining vital experience in operations, investigation, administration, public affairs, and more. He's a graduate of the FBI Academy, the FBI National Executive Institute, the Police Executive Research Forum Senior Management Institute for Police, and the first class of the IMPD Leadership Academy. Chief Bailey is married with 3 children and is a lifelong resident of Indianapolis. I'm super excited about today's topic and conversation. Give it up for our panelists. And without further ado, Mr. Boxer, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Prosecutor Mears. As Prosecutor Mears said, I'm going to talk about a very specific part of the job that I have, the role that I have at the Marion County Crime Lab. There's a couple things that I want everybody to understand first in my 15-minute or so forensic lesson. And the first is the Marion County Crime Lab is a separate agency from the prosecutor's office, from the police department, from defense. We are our own separate kind of island. Okay? That reduces our level of bias. It maintains our neutrality in working with the evidence. So, the second thing that I want everybody to understand, firearms leave, I should say, unique marks on the items that it fires, meaning the ammunition, like the cartridge that I have here. Okay. When it is fired by a firearm, the bullet is going to travel down the barrel of that firearm. That firearm is going to impart unique marks onto this bullet. As we'll talk about a lot tonight, the cartridge case is also going to receive unique individual marks from that gun onto that cartridge case. Okay? No other gun will mark this cartridge case like another gun. Okay? Somewhat you could think of like the fingerprint of that firearm. Okay? It's that unique. The uniqueness of the firearm arises out of the manufacturing process. Okay? So part of my training, to make some of these guys jealous in here, and gals, that might be gun fanatics, is I got to go to Ruger, Colt, these manufacturers of the firearms, and see the manufacturing processes. So I could see how these individual marks are placed or arrive in this gun. So, another little thing to understand while we're going on. When a semi-automatic firearm, or for that matter, automatic firearm, discharges, okay, meaning this cartridge, this ammunition was put in the gun, it was fired. Okay. The semi-automatic or full automatic firearm is going to eject these cartridge cases. It's going to pull it out of the firearm, that firearm is going to push it out. It's going to fall. Okay? It may travel a little bit, it may fall to the ground, it may bounce around a little bit, but the thing is, the semi-automatics and full automatic firearms kick out these cartridge cases. And as you know now, these cartridge cases have unique marks to that gun, okay? A few years ago, IMPD came to the crime lab, and we met with them as a firearms section, and they said, we want you to do business in this manner to where we're going to expedite. We're going to put these cartridge cases into what we call NIBIN. Okay? Get to what NIBIN is in a second. Okay? We said, yeah, we don't do business that way. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see you later. Okay? Fortunately, IMPD came back and said, listen, we love your work, but we really need you to try to figure this out. Again, we said, you know what? We're a big, bad accredited laboratory. You just can't come in. We just can't change things. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see you later. They were persistent. Okay? We finally figured it out. Okay? After many meetings, after us looking at ways we can accomplish this, we found out a way that we could receive these cartridge cases and put them into NIBIN in a very quick manner. Historically, excuse me, cases would be submitted to us. They would go on the backlog. Okay? 4, 5, 6 weeks later, maybe we'd get to that case. It might be longer. Okay? We would examine this case, do everything we could to this case, like it was court ready, complete ready to go, and then we put it into this magic machine that's called NIBIN. Don't worry, I'll get to NIBIN. Okay. So after the incident, we were looking at a delay of entering these cartridge cases of at least a month, if not 2 months or more. Okay. It wasn't working. It wasn't working for IMPD. It wasn't working for the investigative information that this NIBIN can provide. So when we switched to this, what we refer to at the lab as the expedited NIBIN process, we have cut that time down to hours or days from the incident. So now we are entering these cases every day of the week, okay? As part of the program, IMPD brings us these items every morning. Cartridge cases from shooting scenes from around the city. All the cartridge cases get submitted to the property room. All the firearms that they seize of certain caliber get submitted, and they come over to the laboratory every day. Every day we're taking these cases, we're screening them. We're not doing a full workup, we're screening them. That's what we've narrowed it down to get these into NIBIN fast and efficient. So what is NIBIN? NIBIN stands for the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network. Okay? You may hear it referred to as brass tracks, IBIS. For our purposes, NIBIN is what we're talking about. Those mean basically the same thing. NIBIN is an electronic database, if you will. And conspiracy theory people, don't go too far on me. It's not a gun ownership database. I guarantee you that. This is a unique individual characteristics database where we are capturing through digital scans the unique individual characteristics that are imparted on the cartridge cases. Okay? So a case gets submitted to us, several cases get submitted to us every morning, but we will take a case. We will screen this case. It may have 1 cartridge case, it may have 15. Okay? In the event of multiple cartridge cases, we determine how many firearms are involved. Okay? Once we determine that, we choose the best cartridge case for this machine to scan. Like I say, we only need to enter 1 because that firearm is represented by this 1 cartridge case. If there's multiple firearms, we'll enter multiple cartridge cases, 1 from each of those firearms. Okay? Once these scans are complete, like I say, they're digital, 2D and 3D scans. The electronic images are then shipped to a correlation computer in Avondale, Maryland. Okay? This system is set up by the ATF. Okay? So it's nationwide, it's actually worldwide. This computer that receives our scans then electronically compares it to all the cartridge cases of this caliber and type. And what do I mean by that? The caliber, basically the size. Okay? We tell the machine that this has like a circular firing pin impression, if you could see that, okay? Versus a elliptical or rectangular. We tell the machine what kind of breech face marks, or the back of the firearm, what kind of marks those have. So this will compare it. If I say this is a 9mm Luger with a circular firing pin and parallel breech face marks, this machine compares it to all the 9mm Luger cartridge cases that we've entered and firearms that we've entered, test fires from firearms. And it sees if this gun is in the database. It's matching those individual characteristics electronically. So once this computer is done doing its magic and using the algorithm that's obviously proprietary because they probably make a lot of money on it, it sends us back a list of potential candidates. A trained examiner like myself, or somebody trained to read the results of this machine, will sit at the computer and bring these images up. On the computer, because I said it was a 3D scan, we can actually look at the computer and compare these two cartridge cases together, two cartridge case images now, together. And it looks almost like it's under my comparison microscope that I use every day. The technology has gotten that good. So we can make a determination of, was the computer right? Did the computer find out that this cartridge case, this firearm, hasn't been used elsewhere and submitted to us before? So what does this mean in the big picture? Let's say there's a shooting that occurs on the east side of Indianapolis last night. The day before, a shooting occurred on the west side of Indianapolis. We enter those. This machine is going to tell us, hey, these two shootings are related. We may not have known that. The officers, the investigators may not have known this lead, this association has occurred. It's showing us this gun has been used, location to location and location, okay? If we receive the gun, we can create test fires in the laboratory and enter the cartridge cases. And so if we've entered the gun, it will tell us what gun has been used in these incidents all around the city. Now, automatically, when we send these images out via the computer, it compares all of Indiana and Chicago at this time, okay? If we need to, we can tell that machine to compare it to any location in the United States, as well as, I believe, 85 countries outside of the United States. So it is an international. We can do those types of things with NIBIN. We are getting these results basically within hours, okay? Every time we get a result that results in what we refer to as a lead, meaning this one that I just entered, it matches up with another shooting incident that previously has occurred. We send that information to law enforcement and the investigators and to the ATF to say these cases appear to be related via NIBIN, okay? They can then take that information. If it's valuable, they can run with their investigation. Honestly, some of these may or may not be valuable at first glance. If it's a shooting scene, no witnesses, no suspects, nobody's hurt, These cartridge cases are picked up, put into the machine. It may link to another shooting scene. No victims, no suspects, no witnesses. May not be valuable. I'm not going to say I'll let Chief Bailey here talk about those types of value to our leads. But I will share one story where a person was assigned a specific case. It was an FBI agent. All he had was one cartridge case. And he came to me, Doug, can we put it in Niben? Of course we can put it in Niben. Put it in Niben, it hit to a shooting scene. No witnesses, no suspects, no victim. He went out to that shooting scene and knocked on every door until he found a witness that says, oh, that's that guy down the street. He always gets upset with his girlfriend that shoots off his gun. He went to that house, knocked on the door. Girlfriend answered. Does your boyfriend like to shoot his gun when you guys get upset? Oh, yeah. You want his gun? Well, I sure do. Brought the gun to me. Now I can look at that gun. I can put it into Niben and link those two scenes together. His scene, that gun, and the shooting scene. That's what this Niben can do. It goes beyond, of course, human capabilities. We are talking about around 1,869 leads up to this, well, I should say, that's our end of September number right there. There's no way a staff of 5 examiners at the laboratory plus some other ancillary folks in my section that we could look at that many cases and link these up. This machine is just invaluable to the information that it can provide. Chief Bailey, you want to know?
All right. Well, we just got some funding for some new toys for the Marion County Forensic Services Agency to help us too. So first of all, I want to say thank you, and thank you, Prosecutor Mears, for having me here tonight. And it's really good to see so many of my North District friends in the audience tonight. I miss you all very much. You should never let me leave, Carlene. It's your fault. So I'm gonna provide you just a little bit of history about where we're at now with the Indiana Crime Guns Task Force, previously known as the Crime Guns Task Force, or CJIC. I'm gonna try not to talk in acronyms, but unfortunately I work for the government and we speak in acronyms. First, crime gun intelligence centers have been in existence since about 2016. It's an effort led by the ATF. Approximately now in 2022, there are probably about 25 crime gun intelligence centers across the nation. I like to think that ours is the best and leading the way, and I'll tell you why I believe that. Ours came into existence in its first form in 2019. When I go back to 2018 and build on to what Mr. Boxler talked about, and this is the backlog of guns and shell casings and other things that were in our property room. Niben has been around since about 1997, and I just don't think that local agencies knew exactly what to do with the information that came to them, many times months after their investigation had already started. So Captain Mike Bruin led the effort on IMPD. Mike Bruin passed away earlier this year of cancer, but he was a steadfast servant to this county and this city and our police department. He's missed dearly, but his efforts and persistence with the crime lab to make some changes to how we do business is why we find ourselves here today. But each day in 2017 and 18, him and a couple other people walked at least 2,500 guns that were in our property room over to the crime lab for testing, along with all the shell casings or the fired cartridge casings. And the crime lab, in partnership, and prosecutors rightfully recognized how important they are to this, because they are the scientists. They're the ones that provide us this valuable information. But within a few months, we were able to clear up that entire backlog, and what was created by that was another problem. very proud of ourselves that we had a new process. We were getting our returns back within 24 and 48 hours. But now we had a lot of information. You heard the leads information, and now we didn't know what to do with the leads. We had so many of them. What do we do with them? We have to have investigators to start looking at these cases. Some of them were cases that were already assigned to homicide or aggravated assault, and so those were easy ones to assign. It's the cases they talked about where you have a shots fired run and you find the fired cartridge casings on the side of the road and there's no real suspect, and then what do you do? So that's what led to the creation of the Crime Gun Intelligence Center. The Crime Gun Intelligence Center is a partnership between the ATF, the Marion County Forensic Services Agency, the Marion County Prosecutor's Office, the United States Attorney's Office, the Indiana State Police, the Fishers Police Department, the Avon Police Department, Carmel Police Department, Zionsville, Plainfield, Lawrence, Boone County, and soon to be Greenwood Police Department. And I'll tell you how we got there too. We as cops and departments and cities see boundaries. Crime does not see boundaries. They don't care if you live in Hamilton County or Marion County. Crime is transient. It's committed in multiple parts of our central Indiana region, and that's why we all partner together, because cases that are happening in Indianapolis, people live in Fishers. Crimes that are happening in Fishers, the people live in Indianapolis, and vice versa. So it's important for us to work together to keep everybody safe that lives in our communities. So we reduced that backlog. We created this Crime Gun Intelligence Center. We received a grant to hire criminal crime analysts. And why is that important? Well, now we have this lead information. We know that this shell casing has been at least two different crime scenes. And now we have to figure out who's doing it, who's pulling the trigger, and how do we take that gun off the streets to stop the shooting cycle? Because if we don't stop it, that gun's going to continue to be used in some sort of crime, either by the same person or other people. So how do we interdict that? And that's where intelligence comes in. That's the great thing about science, is that science doesn't care what you look like, what gender you are, what class you are, where you live, what car you drive, or any of that. Scientists points us to the tool, the instrument, and whoever's pulling that trigger, doesn't matter who they are, we as law enforcement have to go out and stop them from pulling that trigger again before someone is shot or killed. We put our team together. Our analysts went to work. We use open source social media information, because believe it or not, people like telling what they do on social media. They tell them themselves. They pose with guns that they're not supposed to have because they're convicted felons. All these things that we weren't necessarily paying attention to, not because we didn't want to, because we didn't have the path to do it the appropriate way. And so that's how we got to there. And let's see, let me go through here. He told you what a lead is. Stealing some of my thunder. I will tell you that the cartridge casings, the shell casings, I always say shell casings, or fired cartridge casings is the technical term. We are already at a record number of those collected and analyzed by the crime lab this year. Last year, or we're getting close to a record. I think we're going to break that, and that's a couple things. We've changed the philosophy of how our officers respond to shots fired runs. It's not just to roll through the area, no one's hit, so we roll out. It's now we're going to stop. We're going to look for cartridge cases. We're going to try to talk to the neighbor that maybe didn't call 911, but may have valuable information, like it was a white car. And why is it? I'll tell you why someone telling you something like it's a white car or a blue pickup truck is so important now with our new bits of technology that you are investing in our community. So let me go to my list here. Another important component of what the Crime Guns Task Force does and what the ATF does is something called e-tracing. Every gun that's sold legally, even if it's initially sold legally, you have to go through a process to purchase it, and your name's on it. And so every gun that comes into our possession, we run through ATF's e-tracing system so that we know we can trace the gun back to where it started and then maybe ask questions. We also look at time to crime. So when was the gun bought? And when was the first time it was used in some sort of crime? How do we do that? We use NIBIN. So if the shell casing's in the system, the gun was bought on January 1st, and by March 2nd, we have a fired cartridge casing, and then we find that gun, we know that the time to crime was only 3 months. Indiana has one of the lowest time to crimes in guns anywhere in the country. It's easy to get a gun in Indiana if you didn't know. Okay. The only guns that you will find that don't do that are the ones that what's a new phenomenon that hasn't really hit us to the extent that I believe it's coming, that the East and West Coast have seen. Typically those cities on the East and West Coast have more strict gun laws, and so you can personally make a firearm in your house legally. If you have a $150 3D printer and some materials and instructions from the internet, you can create a handgun tonight and do it legally. Those guns are not serial. They're not there's no serial number that is put on those guns. So as those circulate through our community, e-tracing becomes less effective. One of the things that we're tracking now that through the Crime Guns Task Force that just started earlier this year, thank you for the Crime Lab 2, is conversion devices. And what do I mean by that? Why do I think we have a record number of shell casings that are going to be collected this year? One, I think it's because our cops are doing better work and being more diligent in what they do. If a shot's fired happens at night, day shift has to go out during the daylight and look for evidence. We're testing gunshot detection. Some of the one of the systems in particular, I'm not going to give you the name, is extremely accurate on where you can find firearms evidence. One was a shots fired run. The officers went to the exact location. The shell casings were about 3 feet away from where it triangulated. But the other thing I want to tell you is that you can turn a Glock handgun into an automatic weapon for about $5 and a 3D printer. Automatic weapon machine guns are illegal at the state and federal level. Prosecutor Mears is prosecuting more of those cases and filing more of those cases. We've collected, as of today, about 63 conversion devices. So many of them, if they're metal, they're being made in China and then imported over here. Plastic ones are being made in bedrooms of 16-year-olds and sold on the street. You can also take that same machine and create a piece of plastic that put into a AR-15 and turn this semi-automatic rifle into a fully automatic rifle. Those are things to think about as a concern, and that's one of the focuses also of the Crime Guns Intelligence Center is conversion devices, finding those that are providing those into the community and holding them accountable with the existing laws that we have right now. Like I said, our focus is on trigger pullers. Doesn't matter who they are. We use science and intelligence to lead us to who those people are. Year to date, our Crime Gun Intelligence Center, our Indiana Crime Guns Task Force, has seized 304 weapons, and this is just one group of our people that are out getting handguns and made 344 arrests. I don't always tout the arrest numbers because an arrest can be multiple things. I can go out right now and make 10 arrests for you if you want me to, but they're not going to be quality arrests, right? They're going to be arrests that really may not impact violent crime. They only focus on violent offenders. They're only focused on people that have at least used a gun twice against another person, and so we want them doing this work. Now, some of those charges may not all lead to those serious violent crimes, but these are people that are being specifically looked at because of their behavior. They have been involved in at least 2 incidents where a handgun was fired at another human being, and therefore they're people that we should be afraid of and going after. And our focus is on crime guns, not all guns, right? I want to be clear about that because there's some people that really like their guns and they think that the government's out to get legal gun owners, and that's not it. We're out to get those who are prohibited from possessing guns and those who use them in violation of law. And I had something else to say and I forgot. So why is it important that when you hear shots fired to report those and to see and report what you look out the window and see? You can remain anonymous. So now we have license plate reader technology. We have public safety cameras. We have all these things, and just the smallest bit of information can lead our detectives to the right place. The database for license plate readers is searchable. So if you tell us it was a white Ford truck, we can put that information in there. And if there was a white Ford truck that happened to drive nearby one of our license plate reader cars near the vicinity of where the person was shot or where the shots were fired, then the detectives have even more lead information. It doesn't say that that person did it, or that car did it, or that white truck could have been completely different. But if you run the plate and it comes back to intelligence that was gathered at the house that person's beefing with this person, and now you have the car driving by and you've got the nosy neighbor. I love nosy neighbors. If you're a nosy neighbor, I love you. And I see a few of them in the audience. But that information helps us lead us to those that are involved. Right now, there are 50 people that are working at a 201 North Shadeland that are part of the Indiana Crime Guns Task Force. These folks are professional staff from analysts from Indianapolis, Fishers, the ATF, the prosecutors, community corrections, IMPD, all the places all the other departments that I told you before. And last year, the Indiana legislature, in a bipartisan fashion, funded and created the Indiana Crime Guns Task Force and gave that unit $10 million in order to do their job. We purchased equipment that have helped Crime Lab. We're paying the salaries of officers from other jurisdictions who want to be a part of this task force. And so next year's a budget year, so you may hear me unshamelessly ask you to tell your legislator to provide that funding for 2 more years. And the Fort Wayne area, Allen County, is also looking to replicate what we do here. We've had visits from Albuquerque and Denver and Baltimore and Cincinnati to look at what we're doing in Indianapolis, because it is impacting violent crime. We still have a long way to go, but it's working in my opinion. So that's, I'll answer any more questions that you may have, but Prosecutor Mears, thank you for letting me be here.
Well, thank you very much, Chief, and just want to kind of follow up on what they kind of laid the groundwork with. And so we get all this cool information. What does this look like from a criminal prosecution perspective? And 2 cases really illustrate this point. We had a case that we have filed. The murder occurred on November 27th. We had grainy surveillance footage and 5 shell casings at the scene and a dead body. We had no eyewitnesses, no one was coming forward with any information. And then on December 10th, we had a routine traffic stop. During the course of that traffic stop, somebody was arrested. That handgun was then tested against everything through NIDA, and we figured out that we had the murder weapon. And then from there, the investigator built up the case, and we were in a position to file murder charges. Another case that has since been resolved happened a couple of years ago, but it took place on November 20th. Officers responded to the scene. It's a terrible home invasion. We have 3 shell casings, no victims. I'm sorry, we have 1 victim who is deceased, no witnesses, no information. A short time later, a vehicle is stopped. We get that gun out of the car. The person's arrested for possession of handgun without a license. We take that handgun, we test it, and it's the murder weapon. From there, we also have the defendant's cell phone. We do a search warrant on the defendant's cell phone. Guess what we find? We find, as Chief alluded to, we found the defendant on that day with the handgun the day the murder took place, showing it off, firing the weapon. Our good friend, and I just looked, checked the probable cause affidavit, Doug Boxler, told us, yes, that in fact was the same gun that was used at the homicide scene, and that person's now serving 50 years in the Department of Correction. And so that's what it looks like from a criminal prosecution perspective. What is critical to us is that we're in a position to take these guns off the street from people and be able to link it to all these casings, because we just have too many situations whether it's non-fatal shooting or homicide cases, where we just don't have a lot of information to go on. And then once we get that information, we're able to link that up. Our level of success increases exponentially in terms of our ability to hold people accountable, to file cases, and then successfully prosecute criminal cases. And so it's an invaluable tool to us that has worked time and time again for us to be in a position to hold people accountable. Chief mentioned one of the most emerging and difficult issues that we have in our community right now, which is the issue of Glock switches. I have another ask of everybody who is out here. So currently, we in the Marion County Prosecutor's Office are filing level 5 charges of machine gun, possession of a machine gun, which is a level 5 felony. There is no specific law on the books that addresses Glock switches. And so we are taking a very aggressive interpretation of current law. The Indiana Court of Appeals is going to tell us if we're being too aggressive or not. But I think one of the areas where we can improve on as a state is if we had meaningful legislation that had directly outlawed and prohibited these Glock switches. And I have a couple pictures of Glock switches here. And what this does, as Chief talked about, was it modifies a semi-automatic handgun to an automatic handgun, meaning when you pull that trigger back, the bullets are flying. If I have seen surveillance footage of these cases where guys are getting off 12, 13, 14 rounds like that in a matter of seconds. And it's an issue that we see time and time again. And so what we are doing right now when we come across with these switches, and right here, this is the switch right here. What we're doing, and I'll pass these out so everybody can see them. What we're doing now is we turn it over to the crime lab, and they tell us, yes, this is a Glock switch. And then we are filing charges saying that this is actually, in fact, you have modified this gun. It is now a machine gun, which is a level 5 felony. I think we're one of the few prosecutors' offices in the state that has taken this position. But we are going to use every tool available to us under the law, but it would make our job way easier if there's a specific prohibition of these Glock switches, because it creates a very dangerous situation for people in our community. So with that, though, I did have a couple of follow-up questions before we get to the questions out here from our friends in the community. And just to be clear, Mr. Boxler, when you guys do this initial analysis, that's not the end for you guys. Before I get a report from your name on it, you go through a peer review process. There's still a lot of work that you guys have to do once we have that confirmation. So for instance, in this murder case, we get the lead, but that's not the end of the work for these guys. Mr. Boxler and his team, there's a process involved for you guys to confirm the results that you found. And so how do you verify that information that you get from those initial leads? Walk me through what that process looks like so you're able to testify in court that casing can be matched to that handgun.
Sure. As I stated, the machine is kind of telling us, okay, these two cases may be related. We are confident enough with the machine to give that information to investigators, but it's considered an unconfirmed lead. Okay? If the lead needs to be confirmed, we will then go get that actual evidence. Okay? We'll go over to the property room, say we need the fired cartridge cases in this case, and we'll go ahead and get that firearm back. We've already test fired it because it's in the machine. We'll get that firearm back with the test fires that we created. We will then go back to the lab, put that under the comparison microscope. And the comparison microscope, if you can visualize it, it's just basically two microscopes joined together by an optical bridge that allows me to see both of these items at the same time under the same magnification. I'm looking at those, as you all know now, those unique individual characteristics that firearm imparts on those cartridge cases, and seeing if they agree or match. Okay? I'm looking at those breech face marks, the firing pin impression. These are all unique individual areas that I can see that are, again, imparted by those firearms. When I look at this and determine, yes, these 2 cartridge cases were fired by the same gun, or if I have a test fire, these cartridge cases were fired by this particular gun. Job's not done yet. I have to have somebody else agree with me. So I will have another examiner come up behind me, and I will just say, I need somebody to look at what I have on the microscope. I don't want to bias them. Okay? I don't want to tell them, hey, make sure you're looking right here. That's not how we work, okay? That is to be an independent observation on their part. Okay? If they agree, I do up some images to support my testimony that I'll later show in court if necessary. They will sign that they agree with my findings, and then I create a report of all my findings in that case. That report then gets reviewed by somebody else, and then finally, if there's any corrections that need to be made, not that I ever make. No. I'm glad we have that review process, believe me. The peer review process is very beneficial to me. Once all those corrections are made, then it is considered technically reviewed and administratively reviewed, and that report is then pushed out to the investigators or to the requester. Okay? So it takes a little bit longer than what I described in my expedited NIBIN process for sure. We've cut a lot out in that expedited NIBIN process to get it into NIBIN. Okay? But those are just a screening. When I need to confirm it, I need to do all the things that I was trained to do as an examiner, create that report, review, verify, and then it's pushed out the door.
And Chief, from an investigative standpoint, I think we've seen great success. I mean, I can point to a number of homicide cases where we had utilized this NIBIN technology in order to put us in a position to file cases and successfully prosecute those cases. You mentioned the 3D printing guns and the fact that we're seeing an influx of weapons that don't have those serial numbers, where we don't have those test fires that you get when someone initially purchases a firearm. What can law enforcement do to kind of address those this emerging technology that's providing people, and in particular young people, easier access to firearms? Do you have any thoughts on what you guys can do?
Well, I think, well, first of all, I think you mentioned it in your, when you took the microphone back up, is we have to keep our laws current with what we see as reality in the world. And technology is moving faster than any of us could ever imagine that it is. But we have to make adjustments and be able to make those adjustments quickly. I think educating the community and parents and everyone about what's happening and what these things look like and what to be aware of and all that's important too. From specific to law enforcement, we continue to groups like the Indiana Crime Gun Intelligence Center, detectives and officers that are out there every single day, seeing what the trends are, and then working closely with your folks to make sure that we're holding these folks accountable. Those are a few things I think. I mean, we have to pay attention to what's going on, and typically what starts on the east and west coast eventually gets here, and so we have to maintain those networks of information sharing and pay attention to what's going on out there, because our friends in California are just getting hammered by these person-made firearms, these ghost guns. And there were some updates made to. There hasn't been a meaningful change to federal firearms laws in many years. A lot of the laws that are on the books right now at the federal level are decades old. And so the federal government made some adjustments to some of the ATF rules specific to ghost guns and all those things that went into effect in August. But it didn't change much at the federal level. And one of the things I talked about, E-Trace. E-Trace, if you go to purchase a gun legally, a gun, you fill out paperwork. They keep some paperwork. They send some paperwork to DC. Do you know they're required to keep that in paper form still? They cannot digitize the information because people believe it's a gun registry type thing. So when we e-trace, a person has to go physically search through boxes to verify what that person's from. Still to this day, there was a 60-minute segment on that. So we as a community have to demand from those more from our policymakers, both at the state and federal levels, that there are ways we can protect gun ownership and gun rights, but also be more aware of what's happening in our communities and help better protect the people that are victims of gun crime too.
And just to drive that point home, there was a high-profile incident that happened last week where we recovered the weapons and there were no serial numbers, which certainly indicated to our prosecutors and your detectives that these were ghost guns that were purchased and assembled online. Because we do have our expert here, our technical expert, to talk about these Glock switches, I have some great photography here. I didn't take these pictures, but if you would, just for our audience, explain what the Glock switch does and the impact that has, and just so everybody's clear, we send all these guns to the crime lab. The crime lab is the entity that tells us, yes, this Glock switch, this is the impact that it had on the firearm. So we have a technical expert testify as to what is going on.
And if you don't mind, could you stand up and hold it so we can all see at the same time? Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
It's upside down. Is it upside down?
Okay, so the Glock switch, as you can see, and better in this, it's just that little rectangular piece. Like someone said up here, you can buy these online illegally. You can 3D print these. On the back of the top of the gun, what's referred to as a slide, there's a little cap. All you got to do is pull that cap off using a flat blade screwdriver, hold down on that spring that's in the back here, and then you can slide that on. It takes about, somebody who knows what they're doing, it should take less than 30 seconds to install this device. No problem. What this device does, from what I've learned at least, is it interrupts the firing pin basically disconnect. It holds that firing pin forward, making sure that as you hold that trigger back, that firing pin just keeps going like this, okay? So as long as you hold it back, it's going to be shooting bullets out of that barrel until it runs out of ammunition or until you let go of the trigger. Okay? Typically, this is supposed to fire one shot with one pull of the trigger. That's not the case anymore with a properly installed Glock switch. As Prosecutor Mears mentioned, we do test these. However, we have to go to the state police laboratory. Anybody been to our crime lab by chance? It's exactly like CSI Miami or something, isn't it?
It's very similar, very similar.
Yeah. We're in the basement of the county jail, now former county jail, okay? We don't have a good enough facility to safely fire these auto switches. We have to go out to the state police range where they are very amenable to us. We have a good working relationship with our state police partners. And we will test fire these at that range, okay? And we will simply load our magazine up, pull back on the slide, hold back that trigger. We only insert about 3 or 4 cartridges. That's how many we need to know that this is going to fire full auto, okay? Now, little more information on these. The reason why it's called a switch is it's intended, this little bar up here, over here, if you can see that, push to one side, it's semi-auto. Push to the other side, it's full auto. None of them work like that. Every gun that we've had that we've tested tests full auto, whether it's on one side or the other. So if we see this, if it's functioning, it's going to be a full auto firearm.
Here's a quick video that I'll show up, and I'll keep it here, of a semi-automatic handgun with a Glock switch in it. Come on. One trigger. All those rounds are out of that gun.
Get some.
That guy was very enthusiastic about it.
And so we hope everybody just kind of understands some of the challenges that we're facing as we try to deal with this issue of gun violence in our community. I can tell you one of the great things about working in the Marion County Prosecutor's Office is it is really nice to be able to work with the crime lab and IMPD. Everybody's got the same goal here of trying to make sure that we have the biggest impact on these types of cases. I cannot tell you the amount of strain and pressure the prosecutor's office and law enforcement puts on our friends at the crime lab to get us these results in a timely fashion. But it has put us in a better position to solve these cases more quickly, more effectively, and has led to really an incredible number of convictions. And so I know everybody at the prosecutor's office is grateful for our partnership at the crime lab and our partnership with law enforcement. A little bit more about it was Crime Gun Intelligence Center. I forget what it is now, but you know, we do have a prosecutor who's out there full time working with IMPD. I asked that prosecutor, what does an average day or a week look like for you guys? And they've done 30-something search warrants in 1 week. And so the level of work that's being done out there is really incredible in terms of not only following up on these cases, but following up on people's social media profiles, getting into cell phones. I mean, it's really an all-encompassing investigation that starts with that initial intelligence from firearms. And so I think it's been successful. It's something that we can continue to build on. But as Chief Bailey said, our laws need to keep up with the challenges that we are facing as it relates to Glock switches, ghost guns, and certainly the challenges that we have with the current legislative scheme as it relates to the regulation of firearms. We're not taking as many firearms off the street as we used to. And one of the challenges with the new law is that's fewer guns that we can test against all those shell casings. The two examples that I gave you started off with misdemeanor handgun arrests that led to murder convictions. And so we've lost that tool, and that's something that we're going to continue to work on just because it has impacted our ability to solve cases. We have a number of special guests in the building. I did want to recognize our consulate from Mexico is here again. Anything you'd like to share or add, or just say hello? Okay.
Hello.
So thank you very much for being here again. And then if anybody has any, we're going to get to our awards here very quickly, but we do have time for 1 or 2 questions. Oh, the hands are shooting up quick. First, let me ask you this. If the question's for Chief Bailey, you get to go first. Anybody have a question for Chief Bailey? Man, he was usually more popular.
I know. Yeah. I'm okay with that.
I was joking about that. Man, go ahead.
Me?
Yeah.
My question is, I don't know if the ARA has anything to do with it, but the manufacturers of guns, is there any way that they can change this type so it cannot be fixed to have the pop, 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 pop? You'd think by now, with all the deaths we've had in our, United States of that kind of shooting, going into school, the young 19-year-old just, 2 days ago in St. Louis, another one here and there. These are the gun manufacturers, what's the deal? They want the money, or what's the deal?
I'll defer to our experts.
I guess I did mention that I traveled through quite a few of the firearms manufacturer, and as soon as you talk about some of the mass shootings that have been involved with their firearms, they really don't want to talk about those types of issues with their guns. And that's an interesting question that you raise about could Glock do something to reduce the chance of a Glock switch being installed? And, I would like to ask the Glock company that if they are responding to these, because quite honestly, I just don't know now. I will tell you real quick, there are firearms manufacturers out there who understand what we do as forensic scientists and have come to us and said, what is it that we can do to help you? Okay. If anybody's ever heard of High Point, a cheap gun that you can buy, but they listened to us and said, what do we need to do to help you out? And they have continued some of their practices that help us identify their firearms. So there are manufacturers out there who do know their guns are going to be used in crimes and do take steps to help help out.
It's a very diplomatic answer. I'm impressed.
Given that you have the technology that you have to be able to compare things that are ballistic, I'm wondering why it is that you don't provide that information in terms of, instead of you sitting there and looking at it, technology should say this is a match at 80% or 90% or something like that. Can't you blow through a larger percentage of what it is that you're doing with that kind of an approach?
And wow, you've really hit on a topic there of stuff that we talk about, especially with your percentages. And that's a great question, sir. I do really appreciate that. Like I say, they return a rank number for us. So a lot of times what we see on the top of the list, we will look at those scores and we can basically be comfortable that when I bring up those images, those are going to be elite. However, there are times that algorithm is just not as perfect. And it may rank very highly, but to an examiner or a trained eye, you look at it and you're like, I don't even know what this machine is looking at, because they gave it a high score, it gives it a high score, but in reality, when we get that 3D imaging up, it's not what it should be. So we're not to that point yet. I am sure that the forensic technology, I believe is a company name, they've changed names several times. They are working on getting their system better all the time, and it has evolved greatly. But we're just not there yet to where we're comfortable sending leads out to investigators that we have not looked at personally yet.
I would add to that one of the emerging issues too that we see more and more often, in addition to the ghost guns, is people switching barrels. And as guns become easier to construct on your own, we're seeing more and more of those parts being used in one firearm, and then parts being taken here and put on another firearm. And it used to be that one gun. Now it's that one barrel that is being used at multiple crime scenes, because people are able to construct their own firearms, which presents an additional challenge for all of us, which is another issue that we're trying to sort through.
Are there any laws that prohibit you doing that, or do you really have to be the person that signs off on the person?
To my knowledge, there's no law, but there is the accreditation that we have to follow.
As the technology improves, we're going to get there.
I am confident that yes, we will.
I saw Carlene stand up. I don't want her to be mad at me.
I forgot the question.
Okay.
Chief,
Okay.
Ma'am.
here we
we miss you.
Okay.
And I just want to make a statement. North District has the best commanders and whatever, because they always keep moving up. Keep losing them all the time. We do miss you, but you're still doing a good job.
Thank you,
go.
appreciate
There's
it.
a question here in the front row.
Chief, you mentioned on the example you had in mind in terms of the accuracy of the location of a ShotSpotter result. Can you also comment on the response time that most likely saved a life recently?
Because of the ShotSpotter technology? Well, I'm not familiar with that particular one, so it's, I can't speak to it because I don't know about it. East District, the gunshot detection's being piloted on East District. And I'll be upfront and honest. I've been upfront and honest about it from the beginning. I'm not completely sold on the technology because there's a lot of other things that come with it. But what I've seen from at least one of the companies is pretty unbelievable. But I'll look into that example, and I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't know. But
Just for background of the question, I heard that the police and IFD were there in time to stabilize a victim in a quicker amount of time than the people that were on hold for 911 that were calling in the gunshot reports.
Yeah, so if those of you who don't know how gunshot detection works, the purpose of it is to get a response quicker. So even before there's a 911 call, the officers inside the cars are being notified that there were shots fired. With the company ShotSpotter, they have once the shots are detected, it goes to a third-party person who listens to it quickly, verifies whether or not they believe in it, like similar to what they do at the crime lab, whether or not it's a gunshot, and then immediately then they push that notification out, and it goes to phones, laptops, watches, whatever, and so the officers can start that way ahead of time. So it is to number one, to save a life, two, to interdict a suspect, and three, to gather evidence for prosecution. All those tools is the purpose of gunshot detection. I will tell you that the workload related to that is fivefold more for the officers in the area, so we have to think about what that workload looks like. Because about anywhere between 55 and 85% of shots fired runs aren't called in. They're just people live in neighborhoods where it's just a normal thing and they don't repeat it. That in and of itself is not what we want in a civilized society. So that increases the run load for the officers, and then we have to think about putting technology in their hands, which is one of these, which we don't do right now for all of our officers, that make it even more important if we're going to go to gunshot detection full time.
Final question right up here up front.
Since NIBIN is electronic, I have two questions. What type of protection do you have for hacking? And what type of protection do you have if your system goes down?
And just so our friends who are watching online can see it, I think the question is what type of security protections do you have in place for the system? What was the second part of it?
Go down and
Oh,
hack.
okay, okay. Protection against hacking, and then what do you do if the system goes down?
So as I believe I mentioned, this is a ATF built system, and the Forensic Technology Incorporated, I believe, is the company name that kind of partners with them to make sure that this technology is appropriate, updated, and protected. It is part of the, and I'm not claiming to know exactly what all protections are in place, but it is, when you sign on to this, there's a big old warning sign that says you are using Department of Defense property. So we at least have the level of protection that is afforded to, at some level, them. They are monitoring these NIBIN units around the world constantly, and if there's any hint of problems, they are immediately calling somebody to look into that problem. A couple weeks ago, we were doing some routine cleaning in-house. A cord got moved just slightly and came undone. Immediately there was a call saying, "What's going on? Why is your system not communicating?" I'm like, I don't know. So they had me check all the cords and everything. Sure enough, somebody had just been cleaning and that cord went out. So naturally there's all sorts of protections afforded to this. We've got fingerprint scanners, our password changes constantly. So there is a very high degree, I can tell you, of security on this.
What did you say the acronym was for that?
It is NIBIN, N-I-B-I-N.
Thank you all for your service.
Well, thank you. First of all, can we give it up for our panelists?